Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Be Bold America. I'm your host, Jill Cody. Our program today is Winging It, Improv's Power and Peril in the Time of Trump. Stephen Nachmanovitch once said, "In the new century, we are all winging it now." In the new book, Winging It, Improv's Power and Peril in the Time of Trump, the author explores popular cultural and public affairs, ranging deftly from the unmediated experience in Fred Astaire's tap dancing, Franz Hall's brushstrokes, hookup culture, psychedelic trips, social media, and Hamilton's hip-hop, to last, though not least, the performative and demagogic posturing of Donald Trump. The gesture, the gesture all improvisation share is, "I will create this on the fly." Or, as Trump has stated, "My gut knows more than my brains." This defies rationality and elevates embodied emotions, instinct, and intuition that challenges our assumption that everything of value depends upon long study, tradition, and hard work. Claiming to be free of serious purpose, improvisation only pursues pleasure. Or, so it says. We have big things to do. Our bold guest today is Dr. Randy Peril. Dr. Peril is a writer and philanthropist dedicated to the arts, education, New Orleans, and the environment. Dr. Peril holds a PhD in English and American Literature from Harvard University and is the author of several books, the latest of which is Winging It, Improv's Power and Peril in the Time of Trump. Dr. Peril has taught English at Harvard University, Tulane University, Lemoyne College, and the New School for Social Research. In addition to his writing, Randy is president of the Peril Foundation and the Ruth U. Peril Foundation, named for his mother, Ruth Peril, founder of Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. He is co-founder of the Ridenhour Prizes for Courageous Truth-Telling, now in his 20th year. Dr. Peril lives in New Orleans and New York. Welcome to Be Bold America, Dr. Peril.
Thank you, Jill. Please call me Randy.
Randy, yay! Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Well, Randy, before we delve into your new book, Winging It, please share for all of us why you became interested in improv and how you began seeing its impact, well, everywhere it seems.
Yeah, I do see it everywhere. I'm kind of like that guy in The Beautiful Mind, where he connects everything,
mm-hmm.
and it turns out he's crazy. So be forewarned.
Oh, okay.
I see it under every rock. So here's how it started. Here's my origin story. I was in a graduate seminar. We had read an obscure pamphlet from the Renaissance, a contemporary of Shakespeare, and the professor, I know he didn't have anything up his sleeve in saying this. He just wanted to get the conversation started. But he said, "I bet you've never read anything like this before." It was a really wild ride, kind of pre-associative, very charming, a lot of fun. And, I bet you've never seen anything like this before. And I said to myself, no, it's like Tristram Shandy, and it's like this, and it's like that. And luckily, I didn't speak up because I didn't know what connected these texts. What was the family resemblance that I was feeling? And it was a graduate seminar, so they would have torn me apart because I couldn't have made the case. But it intrigued me, and I thought about it. I wrote a paper about it, and then I wrote a dissertation about it. And oddly enough, his opening gesture is basically what I settled on, and that's what improv says. You've never seen anything like this before, because improv isn't based on models. There's no decorum. There are no rules, and so it's made in the moment. It's impromptu. It's composed in the moment of presentation, and so literally, you've never seen anything like this before. So I settled on the word improvisation, I could have used another. Actually, my dissertation was called Studies in the Rhetoric of Spontaneity. And that's the first paradox of improv, that spontaneity seems to have no purpose. It's just, you're just having fun, you're just noodling. But in fact, it has a rhetorical purpose. It means to disrupt. If I can do this without logic and rationality and all the rules and decorum that, is the basis of much of what we do, then why bother? Why bother with logic and rationality if I can do this off the cuff? What I argue is that the improv has always been with us since the beginning of evolution, because we have two kinds of mental attitudes under our noggin, in our brain. One is what Daniel Kahneman calls fast thinking, and the other is slow thinking. Hot cognition, cold cognition. One is in the moment, totally focused on, danger that may come out of the cane brake. And cold cognition is thinking, well, let's see, this moment, it's kind of like yesterday, so I think I'll behave this way. So hot cognition, when that tiger comes through the cane brake, hot cognition has you running even before you think run or tiger. Cold cognition says, there aren't any tigers around here. It can't be a tiger. I'll just keep, doing what I'm doing. So cold cognition gets the Darwin Award and is a snack for the tiger. So improv is a disruptor, and we develop ways of being in the world that become rigid and set in stone. And improv comes along and says, well, maybe we could do with a little disruption here, and let's try something new. So civilization marches on by this to and fro between hot and cold cognition.
Well, you also mentioned in your book that this improvisation and spontaneity also takes some planning and preparation.
I stumbled on an epigraph or a line from Oscar Wilde late in the game. Right before I went to press, I stumbled on Oscar Wilde saying that spontaneity is a meticulously prepared art. And that's, I think, crucial, because what's important in this disruption of spontaneity is that it's the impression of spontaneity that has the power to disrupt. When Jack Kerouac writes On the Road on a 130-foot scroll, without pagination, without paragraphs, without punctuation, he then takes it to Farrar, Straus and Giroux and says, why don't you publish this? And they say, well, we're going to have to edit it. And he says, oh, no, this is the Holy Ghost. And he left. So he then spent 6 years editing it. And he gets it published and in the late 50s. And next thing you know, it's helping to inspire the 60s. And so it's the impression of spontaneity. It's not actually it's not necessarily impromptu. There are magnificent examples of impromptu behavior. Comic improv has developed this system of very short algorithm, three rules. The first of which is yes and, the rule of agreement. Whatever I say, you have to build on it. You have to say yes and, call and response. And so there are examples of comic improv these days that are truly impromptu, where a word is thrown out from the audience, and the next thing you know, they're building a narrative out of, sesquipedalian.
Well, you begin your book with a man who enters stage left with a metronome. Would you share for all of us that bit?
That's another late find. I was watching a documentary, I forget what streaming service, about Second City and the Chicago Improv group. There's this, 30-second, 45-second little sequence where there are half a dozen hipsters. It's the late 50s. They're nicely dressed, but they're clearly hipster types, beatniks, and they're on the stage and they're beating out a kind of syncopated rhythm. Each has their own rhythm. They work together, but they're all doing their own thing. And then there's this guy who kind of out hipsters the hipster because he comes in. He's got a hat on or something that distinguishes him, and he's carrying a doctor's satchel. He looks around furtively, and they're still beating along their syncopated rhythm. And he opens his doctor's bag and takes out a metronome, and he slyly puts it on the chair and sets it tick-tocking, and it throws them all off. They can't keep their rhythm, and it all, it goes to blackout. That's the end of the skit. And so that I took to be a key metaphor for what improv does. It takes the metronome of our daily lives, the rule-bound lives that we have to follow, and it throws a curveball at it and sets us on a different trajectory.
I like that analogy very much, and this is a good time to take a break because I have many questions prepared for you, Randy. Good. We'll just keep going. You are listening to Be Bold America on KSQD 90.7, 89.5, and 89.7 FM, serving the California Central Coast. Many voices, one station. Listen globally online from the KSQD.org website. Our topic today is Winging It, Improv's Power and Peril in the Time of Trump. Our bold guest is Dr. Randy Fertel, who is a writer and philanthropist dedicated to the arts, education, New Orleans, and the environment. Randy holds a PhD in English and American Literature from Harvard University and is the author of several books, the latest of which is Winging It. Learn more about Dr. Fertel at fertel.com. That's FERTEL.com. I'm your host, Jill Cody.
Hello, K-Squid listeners. I'm Tom Hartman, and each weekday at 4 p.m., I bring you a different perspective on the news than you're likely to hear on most media outlets. Please join me on KSQD Santa Cruz, your ink spot on the dial for the Tom Hartman program, heard now for the first time ever in the Monterey Bay area at 90.7 FM, weekdays at 4 p.m. That's Progressive Talking Conversation with me, Tom Hartman, weekdays at 4 p.m. on KSQD 90.7 FM. Tag You're It.
Me, Rainn Wilson. I'm an actor and the author of Soul Boom, Why We Need a Spiritual Revolution. And KSQD can help with the spiritual revolution starting on the Central Coast of California. Support KSQD, K-Squid. That's how you remember it. K-Squid Radio today. Thank you so much.
We're back. Would you like a friend to hear this interview on Winging It, Improv's Power and Peril in the Time of Trump? Be Bold America is available as a podcast on Apple, Spotify, Podcast Addict, Downcast, Overcast, and YouTube. Subscribe for free or listen to the show at Be Bold America's homepage on the KSQD.org website. I also would like to give a special shout out not only to our listeners in the United States and Canada, but especially to those overseas, the United Kingdom, Austria, Germany, and Algeria. Thank you so much for listening. Those of us in California love that you tune in. Now, Randy, we think about improvisation. We typically think of the arts. But in Winging It, you show how important and valuable improvisation is for the sciences and other spheres as well. What do we lose when we only think of improv as entertainment?
Well, you miss its rhetorical power. You miss that it has a persuasive edge to it. The first thing it does is it conveys authenticity. I'm making this up on the moment. I'm using my intuition. I'm using my instinct. This is coming from deep inside me, so it must be right. And so I'm authentic and I'm authoritative. And from there, it goes into what I'm trying to persuade you of, whatever disruption I'm trying to convince you need to consider. So that, I think, the overarching loss is, we don't take it seriously enough. And, Trump is a very good example of, he came down that golden escalator in 2015, and I heard that first rant, and I thought, man, I knew there was a dark side to improv, but I didn't know how dark it could get.
Right.
And early in the campaign, and for some time, many commentators would remark on what an improviser he was, but then they would just dismiss it as if that explained, he's an improviser. Who would vote for an improviser? And yet that's exactly how he grabbed his base. Not, there are a lot of explanations of how he has this power over his base. I'm just contributing one little piece to it. But it's an important piece, and it's usually dismissed. Well, I looked at your book, and his base basically feels abandoned.
Yes. Yes, they do.
And his improvising was his way of saying, listen, I'm not like them. I'm not like Hillary Clinton. I'm not like the coastal elites. I don't read white papers. He was once asked, have you read about NATO before throwing it out the tent? And he said, "Oh no, I don't read white papers. My gut knows more than many brains." So that's exactly what they needed to hear. That's what they wanted to hear. What they heard, that they were often interviewed during his rallies, and many would say, journalists take him literally, but it's important to take him seriously, not literally. And I think what they took him to be saying is, listen, just as I, Trump, am disrupting the decorum of civic discourse, I will disrupt politics. When he would say things like, I'm going to bring back coal in Appalachia, his Appalachian crowds would what they would hear is, well, I know he can't bring coal back, it's over. But what he'll do is he'll do whatever it takes to make us not feel abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
That's a powerful rhetorical gesture. And of course it was BS. He's nothing but BS. He's, Washington Post cataloged 30,000 lies in his 4 years in tenure. Every time he went off the prompter, and every time he said indecorous things like, if you attack the journalists, I'll pay for your lawyers, or when he made fun of the disabled journalist, or all those indecorous things were just manna to their hungry mouths. They just didn't feel abandoned. And of all the people to lend a sense of authenticity to, this guy with an orange tan and 30,000 lies, it's a very odd thing to attribute to him.
I forget who said it, but recently I heard the quote that people don't remember what you say, but they remember how you made them feel. He made them feel not abandoned anymore.
Yeah.
That he saw them.
That's really good, yeah.
Yeah.
He saw them.
He saw them.
He saw them. One of the secret power of improvisers Comic improvisers build these narratives out of nothing, just a couple of words, and they're off and running. And they do it because they're great listeners. And he's not a great listener in the sense that he's not going to listen to you or me. He's not going to listen to the grown-ups in the room, but he listens to his base. He listens to the crowd. He listens for that explosive response that his narcissism is so much in need of. People have talked about where the Mexican wall policy came from. And apparently...
Oh, you're going exactly into one of my questions about the wall being a mnemonic. Yes. Go ahead.
And his handlers had asked him to be sure to talk about the immigration problem. And he reified it. He turned it into a thing. He said, we're going to build a wall. They just loved
that explosive response.
Explosive response, which, narcissists just eat up like ice cream. And so it became policy, and it became first a plank, and then it became policy. And, of course, the Mexicans were going to pay for it and all that. And, there's not much of a wall down there, and the Mexicans certainly aren't going to pay for it. But as far as they're concerned, he built it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
They believe he built it because he made him feel like he was going to build it. Yeah.
And that was
that's the key. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I was really surprised when I read that, because I remember it being a mnemonic that his advisor told him, and then he said it, and they had that explosive response, and then it became policy. And now it's a chant, a malicious chant, I would say, hurt many people, even to this day.
Certainly the people at the border.
Yes.
Many of whom deserved a chance to get in.
Well, you also talk about the performative and demagogic posturing of Donald Trump. Tell us more about that.
Well, it's all performative. It's all the demagogy. I don't know where to start. He's all transactional, and here's one of the links to improv. Improv is also built on lies. If I say, there's an ogre chasing me, you have to build on that narrative. There are no ogres. I don't know if you've noticed. There are no ogres. So that's a big lie. It's an innocent lie, and maybe some, charming narrative comes out of that. But there's a natural link between that kind of improv and his kind of improv. It's all built on lies. His are dark, and improv are just for fun or amusement.
Well, you were talking about also in your book, malignant charisma versus comic improv.
Malignant charisma versus benign charisma. And one of the things, I've been thinking about this for 50 years, and one of the things I've realized is that you cannot improvise if you're not in a charismatic state. You've got to be just in the moment. You can't be doubting whether you're going to come up with the rhyme word or the response to your partner's call. You've just got to go with it. And so I decided that I'm going to think of that as charisma. And, Weber talks about charisma as Hitler was charismatic. So there's a malignant charisma, which is about narcissistic fulfillment of the cult leader's needs. And then there's the sweetness of the charisma of a comic improviser who's appealing to his audience to come along with him in this narrative building. And out of that comes a community building, which is the opposite of cult building.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you also talked about there's a little white lie in improv. What's that?
Well, that's what I'm talking about. That if I say, there's an ogre chasing me, that's a little white lie. But it's a white lie. His big lie is that, America is suffering a carnage, and you have every reason to be fearful and angry, and, none of that. Look at the economy, that they just ignore all the positive signs of in this campaign. And so he'll say anything to destroy his opponents and to manipulate his base.
Well, what just sort of came to mind when you were talking about that idea is that seems like a formula on a right-wing television. When I see Fox News people, they create a story. Maybe the carnage or the economy is so terrible. Yeah. They create something out of whole cloth. And then out of that empty story, they get outraged and hysterical.
Yeah.
And it's not real.
It's not real.
It's not real.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a break. You are listening to Be Bold America on KSQD 90.7, 89.5, and 89.7 FM, serving the California Central Coast. Many voices, one station. Listen globally online from the ksqd.org website. We are interviewing Dr. Randy Fertel. Randy is president of the Fertel Foundation and the Ruth U. Fertel Foundation, named for his mother, Ruth Fertel, founders of Ruth Chris Steakhouse. And he is co-founder of the Ridenhour Prizes for Courageous Truth-Telling, now in its 20th year. Read more and learn more about his book at fertel.com, fertel.com. We will be right back after Jim Hightower's commentary titled, Yes, Kamala Harris stands for diversity and equality, so does America. I'm your host, Jill Cody.
Ted Cruz actually spoke the truth once. In 2016, when running for president against Trump, he said, Donald has a problem with strong women. This is not subtle. It's not complicated. Right. This truth is resurfacing now that Trump finds himself unexpectedly matched against a very formidable woman, Kamala Harris. Resorting to his old slap-him-down style, Trump immediately called Harris dumb as a rock, even as he mispronounced her name. He then had his press secretary flail at Harris as weak, yet adding that she's dangerously liberal. So she's weak, yet dangerously strong. Pathetically, MAGA world is resorting to overtly racist, anti-female tropes to attack Harris, proclaiming her to be a DEI vice president, i.e., chosen solely because she's a woman of color. When you go down that road, bellowed Representative Tim Burchett, you take mediocrity. Tim, a mediocre, ethically corrupt Trump acolyte from Tennessee, has only one claim to fame. He once sponsored a bill to legalize the eating of roadkill. Meanwhile, Trump's own VP choice, J.D. Vance, piled on the Harris DEI attack. That's awkward, since Vance, who falsely poses as a senatorial hillbilly, is the ultimate DEI product. A Yale Law School graduate, he was handpicked by Silicon Valley elites for plum jobs, then financed by right-wing billionaire Peter Thiel to run a hedge fund hustle. Then Thiel gave $10 million to put Vance in the U.S. Senate. The smug senator now trashes Harris and her women supporters as, quote, a bunch of childless cat ladies. This is Jim Hightower saying Trump and his rich bros think trashing a strong woman is a winner, but they're about to learn that this is an inclusive America, and Harris's diversity is a strength. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is made possible by you subscribers to Jim Hightower's Lowdown on Substack. Find us at jimhightower.substack.com.
We're back. Our topic today is Winging It, Improv's Power and Peril in the Time of Trump. And our bold guest today is Dr. Randy Fertel, author of Winging It. Before we go on, Randy, do you have any thoughts to share after hearing Jim Hightower's commentary? Did anything come up for you?
Well, First of all, I'm so happy to be in company with Jim Hightower. Jeez. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
What a breath of fresh air. He's wonderful. He's wonderful.
Yes, he is.
You know, I have a thought that I want to share with you about
Please.
your idea of abandonment. It's kind of it's not a pushback against it. It's a like a different angle on that whole problem. And I looked at your book and the story about your mother, and what jumped out at me in the introduction was that your stepfather, I think he saved her.
Mm-hmm.
And he saved her by listening.
Mm-hmm.
He saved her by listening to her, by hearing her story.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I taught the literature of war for decades, and you can't teach war narrative and not stumble on trauma psychology. And so I learned from trauma psychology that we all need a story that explains our lives. We all carry a story that explains who we are and how we got here. But trauma comes along, and it's a surprise. The story didn't accommodate the possibility that could happen. Abuse in families and rape and all these terrible things that surprise us. And recovery from trauma means returning to that event and making sense of it, and then communalizing it. You have to make sense of it, make sense of the fact that was always a possibility, and that possibility needs to be part of your life narrative. But you can't just figuring that out on your own isn't going to help you recover. You need to communalize it. You need someone to listen to you. You need a good listener. And so the more I thought about improv for this book, the more I am thinking about Trump's base and their sense of abandonment. I think that one of the things, the three characteristics of the traumatic state of PTSD, and one is hyperarousal, where you're always prepared for the return of the trauma. The other is intrusion, which is the flashback experience. And the third is constriction, which I think fits with your abandonment thing. Constriction is the numbing response of surrender. And recovery returns us to a sense of agency. Recovery frees you from that frozen state of surrender. And, improv, comic improv, when a guy is in impromptu creating in the moment, he is in that charismatic state. He is totally in a state of agency. And think about the 20th century. Is there a more traumatic century? Well, the 30 Years' War, there's been some other bad centuries. But the 20th century was a humdinger. And isn't it interesting that the 20th century popular culture is dominated by improv? Jazz, rock and roll,
interesting.
hip-hop, comic improv. And then comic improv takes off and just begins to dominate Hollywood. So you can think of popular culture now as basically improv. And so there's a compensatory aspect to witnessing a really talented improviser. And that is that you're watching someone who has a total sense of their own agency. And I think this dovetails well with your red and black I forget what your metaphor is, but this
living in the red, living in the black. Yes.
Yeah, this is living in the black.
Yes.
And trauma, you're living in the red, and in recovery, you're living in the black. Mm-hmm. And when you're living in the black, you're living in a sense of agency, of not self-sufficiency, but of self-agency, of I can do this. So that of course was Trump's appeal, that I alone can do this, and as your cult leader, you can ride my coattails and share my sense of agency, something like that. So that's what came out of my taking a look at your book.
Well, thank you.
I'm really intrigued by that.
Well, thank you for that insight. I see, obviously, people who will be listening and are listening, living in the black are positive things where you're creative and people are compelled to be with you. You make them feel good. We talked about how you make others feel. And living in the red are things that are repelling and destructive and emotions. And it just seems like what Donald Trump is totally putting into our society in his improv of speaking off, his spontaneity are destructive and repelling ideas. And we all feel like we're living in abusive carnage, right? An abusive relationship here in the entire country. And we've been living in the red for so long that I think a lot of people are feeling the stress of it. And I would think that is why Kamala's now becoming our Democratic hopeful for the presidency, the joy that has sprung out, the living in the black, the joy, I think it's in response to...
What a week it's been.
What a week.
What a week.
It's just, we had so many years of being under the thumb of these negative emotions and the violence and the hate and the destruction and the repelling, and the response has just been profound. And brought joy back to this country.
And Biden, we love Biden,
right?
But we didn't have a sense of agency.
No, that's true.
We felt stuck with Biden.
Yes.
We didn't feel like he could win. We treasure his achievement in these 3 years, but he wasn't going to get to finish the job.
Right.
And and the way she slipped into the role has been amazing.
Perfect.
I have a blog too, and I do short pieces, and I have one. I'm thinking about one about her laughter, about her laugh, which even I was bothered by during her vice presidency. I heard a commentator on MSNBC explain, I think he was talking about the laughter, but anyway, I apply what he said to her laughter while she was vice president, or while she was, in the secondary role. And that is, he said, the vice president can't outshine the president. And obviously, she has this incredible natural laugh, but I think she would impulsively, impromptu, just flow into a laugh, and then she would realize, I can't overwhelm this, I can't let this out. I've got to suppress it. And so what bothered me about her laugh was that it wasn't as natural as it and full-throated as it is now. And God, now it's just unbelievable.
Well, just to take a second to add to that, I felt about the laughter is that in comparison to the darkness we were living during those years, it was jolting. That it almost seemed improper to be laughing when we're in this sort of domestic abusive relationship with our president and with this man that wouldn't recognize that he lost an election. It just seemed jolting and maybe out of proportion. But now it's the same laugh, but it's bringing joy. And because we've felt a release from those dark times. So
pure joy.
I'm just seeing that her laugh is maybe the same, but we're perceiving it differently because of where we are. That's just...
I think that's part of it too, yeah.
Yeah, part of it. Well, let's take a break here.
Clearly her mother's laugh.
Yes.
And I love that she's bringing the subcontinent to America.
Yes.
And I love the irony that J.D. Vance has a Asian wife, and so they can't totally dump on her Asian, well, they're going to. They're going to.
Background, right.
Yeah. But anyway,
well,
and how about J.D. Vance? What a mess he is.
Oh, my goodness. Well, if you're just joining us, my bold guest today is Dr. Randy Fertel, who is a writer and philanthropist dedicated to arts, education, New Orleans, and the environment. Randy holds a Ph.D. in English and American literature from Harvard University and is the author of several books, the latest of which is Winging It, The Improv's Power and Peril in the Time of Trump. You may learn more about Dr. Fertel at fertel.com. You're listening to Be Bold America on KSQD 90.7, 89.5, and 89.7 FM, serving the California Central Coast. Many voices, one station. I'm your host, Jill Cody.
Monday evenings at 6 p.m. on K-Squid. Tune in for an hour of locally produced talk programs created by women featuring in-depth explorations of our inner and outer worlds.
On first and third Mondays, Moment of Truth with Amy Chen Mills takes a look at the current state of our planet and nation with leading activists and thinkers on essential topics as well as experts for our own resiliency and spiritual and emotional grounding during these challenging times.
Every second Monday, tune in for State of Mind with Deborah Sloss, featuring intimate conversations about mental health and wellness. Join us for new understandings, seeds of hope, and valuable resources.
Every fourth Monday at 6, you'll hear The Babblery with Suki Wessling. The Babblery features conversations with and about women in the 21st century, working, parenting, playing, voting, advocating, and creating as women.
Women-created, women-led programs about our inner and outer worlds. Every Monday, 6 to 7 p.m. on KSQD. Streaming and available as podcasts on ksqd.org.
State of Mind.
Moment of Truth with Amy Chen Mills.
And The Babblery.
And if you're just joining us, we're talking with Randy Fertel. Randy, in the introduction of your book, Donald Trump talks about my gut knows more than my brains. And you have a cartoon that shows Trump asking his gut, quote, "So gut, what do we think about climate science?" And on Be Bold America, we often host topics on the climate crisis, and it was terrifying to me to think the future of civilization perhaps, depends on Trump's gut. Your thoughts?
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, he pulled us out of the Paris Accords, and we're in. His return to the White House would just be catastrophic. There's just one, the environment, the democracy, economics. In every way, it'll be a disaster. And it's all instinct driven. It's all his gut. Daniel Kahneman, the economist who's thinking fast and slow, he won the Nobel Prize. He said on a podcast I happened to catch that there's no correlation between intuition and accuracy. He said if you think, if an idea comes to you out of the blue, you'll label it an intuition, and you'll say, "Oh, it must be true because I intuited it." And so this is a culture thing. In our culture, we lend authority to the intuitive, the instinctual, and, there's reason for that because, evolution gave us hot cognition, and we need to listen to hot cognition sometimes to get out of the way of that tiger coming to eat us. But there's no correlation. There's no necessary accuracy to intuition. I mean, how many times have you had bad intuitions? And for example, your psychopaths that you write about, our intuition doesn't clue us in to how bad they are.
That's true.
Because they're good mimics. They aren't truly empathic, but they're empathic enough that they can mimicry feeling. And, I don't know if you know Leslie Jameson's article on empathy, that she says that empathy is always somewhere between a gift and, what does she say, danger or gift and something very negative. And I explore that in the book, the dark side of empathy. And his listening to his base is a kind of dark empathy.
Well, you talked in your book about norm breaking and vigilantism. Is that what you were thinking about?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. I wasn't sure how far you got in the book. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's Jane Jacobs is. I'm a big fan of the urbanist Jane Jacobs, and she has the idea that we don't need urban planners. We just need eyes on the street. We just need enough urban density that there are people always on the street and familiar with who belongs where, and I make the leap. I say, but you can slide from eyes on the street to vigilantism really easy. Those people who stormed the Congress on January 6th, they felt totally, their intuition was telling them that they were doing the right thing. That was vigilantism, that they were taking the law into their own hands. And to this day, Trump, of course, thinks they were totally justified. And when we put him back in the White House, he's going to set them all free.
Well, it fed that malignant narcissism in it. Just to change, because this is a question I wanted to ask you, and because most of us are on Facebook, you have a fabulous chapter on our Facebook feed, and you say that social media are a massive collaborative work of improvisation, both top down and bottom up. Since just about everyone listening has a Facebook feed, please tell us a lot more about the spontaneity of our Facebook feed.
So who create, so one of the definitions of improv is that it's autonomous, that, it's not your cognitive function that's creating the text or whatever, the behavior. It's intuition or instinct or impulse, emotion, embodied emotion. And, who's creating the content on Facebook? It's us. It's not the guys in charge of the algorithm. Okay, so in that sense, it's bottom up. All the content comes from us. But the algorithm comes from them, and it's top down. And the algorithm is this, mysterious thing that is just a set of steps which go into what engineers call a black box. We're not sure what happens in there, but the algorithm using machine learning is given one purpose: increase engagement.
Right.
And using machine learning, it quickly figured out, well, the best way to increase engagement is fear and anger.
Go for the lizard brain.
Go for the lizard brain. Yeah, exactly.
The amygdala.
Amygdala, yeah. And where the seat of the emotions. the social media is, some people call it Las Vegas in your pocket. Your iPhone is a constant. You're looking for that next hit of oxytocin or dopamine. So, if you write a post that got a little bit of response, well, maybe next time you'll put a little more fear and anger in it and see how that works. And sure enough, it'll get more response because the algorithm is looking to increase engagement. So next thing you know, you're looking for reasons to be angry. And, of course, there's plenty of reasons for that. Suddenly you're in the red. You're not in the black.
You just said what I was going to say, that, both worlds are out there. It's just which one you choose to live in, being angry all the time and outraged and feeling like a victim and grievance and living in the red day in and day out, which I think would just be exhausting. And then living in the black and choosing to be, trustworthy and honest and happy and bring joy and a smile and, those things into the world, which your life is going to be a lot brighter and a lot more livable too. Well, in these last few minutes, Randy, I like to ask what ideas you might have for us to keep doing, stop doing, start doing, as they relate to winging it, and how we, in this new century, can wing it. Our future depends on it.
Well, first of all, because there's such a thing as dark improvisation, and because there's a horrible dark improviser in our world, doesn't mean we need to throw improv out with the bathwater. It's a very positive force. It's a culture bringer. When Biden at the State of the Union address a couple years ago manipulated the Republicans by saying, I know you want to get rid of Social Security, and they started heckling, oh no, we don't want to get rid of Social Security. And he said, oh, well, I'm glad to hear you. I'll count on your vote when we bring that up, because they wanted to sundown it. There's a positive improv, and certainly Kamala is a gorgeous improviser.
And we have 30 seconds. Just so you know, we have 30 seconds.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. She is so open and free, and I think we need to celebrate that in her and vote early and often.
Well, one thing is to start living in the black. Start being a positive influence in the world and in your circle of influence. Well, Dr. Fertel, thank you for being our bold and impressive guest today. It was so good to have you on the show. You have written a brilliant book. I liked all the pictures as well as the ideas in it, too. Thank you for being on Be Bold America.
Thank you. It was great fun.
And thank you for mentioning my book and giving me that new perspective on abandonment. That was very nice. What's up next?
We can talk again sometime.
We could. What's up next on Be Bold America? On August 25th, we'll be discussing a new book on our beautiful state, California, How California Works. Building Democracy in the Golden State unlocks the mystery of how our state government works and empowers you on how to create change. We'll be talking with award-winning journalist and author Jonathan Vankin about our state's democracy being messy, often frustrating, and always requiring compromise. But with enough work and a little smarts, it delivers. Please join us again on August 25th at 5 p.m. for How California Works. As a reminder, Be Bold America is available as a podcast. Now you may listen to the show anytime for free by subscribing through your favorite podcast platform. Also, you may reach me during any time at info@ksqd.org. I want to give a special thank you to our talented Be Bold America's program engineer, Nyanko Neasu, and to our station's tireless program director, Howard Feldstein. You are listening to KSQD Santa Cruz and KSQD Prunedale, many voices, one station. Listen worldwide, online at ksqd.org, and stay tuned for Talk of the Bay. And in closing, in these settling times, I want to share something that I try to live by, because you never know whose day you might brighten in addition to brightening yours. And that is, let your smile change the world. Don't let the world change your smile. My name is Jill Cody, and thank you for listening to Be Bold America. Until next time, keep, stop, start.